Well, it is difficult to believe this, but 10 years ago today, I stood here to begin serving as your pastor for the first time. It's hard to believe. 10 years have... I promise that is not to elicit any response, but it's hard to believe that 10 years have passed. In our case, it's hard to believe that was 3 children ago, which is how we measure time. But started here in October of 2010. Actually started as a pastor full-time in July of 2001. And so we're on our way towards 20 years that I've been doing this. That's kind of hard to believe. And when I think back to the very beginning of what it was like to begin serving as a pastor, I remember having something asked of me that candidly I wasn't prepared for. This was not something they talked about in seminary. This was not something I had given much thought to. Now, in truth, it wasn't a colossal deal, but it was just something I just honestly out of the gate didn't know how to answer. The question was this: what do you want us to call you? And so my initial thought was, how about something nice? Something repeatable in public, that type of thing. But behind that, what was this? And they began to flesh it out, and they said, sometimes, and there have been pastors that we've had and growing up and all this type of thing, some wanted to be called pastor, or some wanted to be you want to be called Preacher Michael, Pastor Michael? What would you like to be called? And so I said some nonsense like, on Tuesdays, I would like to be apostle. On every other Thursday, bishop. And so just some nonsense like that. But in the end, I thought about it, and I said, I was 26 years old at that point, and so I said, honestly, for 26 years, Michael has worked. And I'm okay with that. How about we just do that? And sincerely, I appreciate and respect what it is that they were doing, which is that they were seeking to demonstrate the fact that they had respect for the individual, just simply for the position of someone that is operating in leadership in a church, someone that's a pastor. And I appreciated sincerely their sensitivity to that fact. But one of the things that I was beginning to realize for the first time is this: in my service for the Lord, as I'm following Him and doing the stuff that He's called me to do, I am experiencing some level of prominence. There's a level to which I am getting in the spotlight, and I need to know how to manage that properly. I need to know how to manage being in the spotlight. Hold that thought for a moment. Let me just say this. For the past number of weeks, we've been working our way through a series that has been called It's Not About You. And it's a very simple premise, and it's something that, while basic, we have to be reminded of, which is that as a follower of Jesus, God wants to use me, and He wants to work through me in ways not to elevate me, but to elevate and point people to Him. That He wants to use me as a reflection of Jesus, that He wants to use me as a means to demonstrate and point people to Him. Now, with that in mind, understand this fact: as you take that seriously, as you make yourself willing, and as you make yourself available to the Lord to work through, He is going to use you. He is. He is going to use you. And He's going to use you not in isolation. He's going to use you to impact other people. I'm not saying it's going to be 1 million people. It could be just a few people. But God is going to use you to influence and to work through and to demonstrate Himself to other people. As that happens, you, by virtue of your service to the Lord, are going to have some attention on you as you serve Him. Now, if that is the case, and it is, we're left with this question: how should I, or how can I properly manage the attention that I get as one of His followers? If you take following Him seriously, He's going to use you. So the question is, how can I properly manage the attention that I may get as I serve Him? Well, we could sit around and just say, well, what do you think? But we don't need to do that. We need to say, what does God say? And He's given us, I believe, some principles in His Word that answer that question as we conclude this series today. And we find those answers in John chapter 3. If you would look with me in your Bibles there today. John chapter 3, and we're going to start reading with verse 22. John chapter 3, starting with verse 22. We're told after this, Jesus and his disciples went to the Judean countryside where he spent time with them, that's the disciples, and baptized. Now, John was also baptizing in Aenon near Salem because there was plenty of water there. People were coming and being baptized since John had not yet been thrown into prison. Then a dispute arose between John's disciples and a Jew about purification. So they came to John and they told him, "Rabbi, the one you testified about and who was with you across the Jordan is baptizing, and everyone is going to him." John responded, "No one can receive anything unless it has been given to him from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said, 'I am not the Messiah, but I have been sent ahead of him.' He who has the bride is the groom, but the groom's friend who stands by and listens for him rejoices greatly at the groom's voice. So this joy of mine is complete. He must increase, but I must decrease." All right, so we're left again with a question. As a follower of Jesus, I'm going to, in ways small and great, I'm going to get in the spotlight. So how can you, as a follower of Jesus, properly manage that attention? John the Baptist was a guy that got in the spotlight. And he is a wonderful example, not simply of a person that God used, but a person who properly managed that attention. And from him, I believe we can learn a couple of important lessons that we've got to remember. And the first is this: remember that you are not the main attraction. Remember that you are not the main attraction. At this point, you are still very early on in Jesus' public ministry. He has been baptized. That kind of served as the inauguration to Jesus' public ministry. And he was baptized by who? By John the Baptist. And so Jesus is going about, he is teaching, he has the disciples, he is engaging people, he is teaching, he is beginning this work of ministry. And as he is doing that, John is still doing the ministry that God has called him to. He is in many ways an Old Testament prophet in a New Testament or almost New Testament setting. Right, for 400 years there has been this silence, the absence of a prophet, the absence of some clarion call to direct people's attention back to God, and God raises up and sends John the Baptist to fill that role. And so John is out and he is doing his ministry. And we're told actually where the locations were. So he's some distance to the north. They are separated from where Jesus is actually doing his ministry. And as John is teaching people, as he is baptizing people, as he's doing the work that God called him to, he is garnering attention. People have for some time been taking note of him. People have become followers or adherents of John the Baptist. But he's doing what he's doing because God called him to. But he's managing the spotlight. He's managed that attention well, and he does so because he understood what we need to, that we're not the main attraction. And so God is using John the Baptist to communicate truth and understanding in ways that had not been experienced for some 4 centuries. But as he is doing this, John is gathering, and there's a lot of people that are following John from place to place. And I don't want you to envision, and John was kind of a weird guy. You remember we're told even how he dressed, we're told about his diet. And so he dressed funky, he had a weird diet, and he had all these followers. Don't envision him as some sort of crazy cult leader, because he wasn't. Think of it more like this. That you have, and it has been true throughout the scope of history, throughout the scope of people pointing others to either the real God or to a false God, whatever. There have always been religious leaders that will, by virtue of their service, demonstrate themselves in such a way where they get followers, where they're hearing them, and they're saying, you speak in ways that I get. I like how you do this. I understand what you are saying. It occurs today so that whether it's people at Gate City or pick any church across the country around the world, you will have a pastor, you will have someone that's leading a church that it's not that you are my followers per se, but you're in some ways disciples of me. That you apparently you're screwed up, and so. You get how I do what I'm doing, and you have decided by virtue of your presence, by virtue of you listening, that you like this. And so you stay on that channel with me. The same thing was going on with John the Baptist. Later, you see that there is tension as Paul addresses this, because you had some saying, hey, we're Paul kind of guys, and others saying, no, we're followers. Apollos is the guy that we like to listen to. So it has always been this way, and John the Baptist has these people that are following him and listening to him. They like him, and there is this discussion that occurs, this debate that begins between one of John's disciples and some unnamed Jew, specifically about purification. Now, what does that mean? What's he talking about? Well, at points in the past, we've dealt with some passages that alluded to this, but in Jewish rabbinical teaching, there were a whole series of instructions to cover how it is even the most basic things should be done, including even how hand washing was to occur. And so not only did you have the law of God, you had the law of Moses, you had the law of the rabbis, the teaching of the rabbis, the teaching of tradition over time. And they were thinking about even the proper way to wash hands. And so they were thinking about washing hands. Now you got John baptizing, a word that literally means to immerse. And that says something about cleaning, cleansing, purification. And so there's this discussion that arises between this Jew and one of the disciples of John the Baptist about purification, likely about water and about how it is that it's to be used and what the symbolism, what the significance is. So that is going on, and it seems that causes there to be this attention on this whole idea of baptism. And so they go then, John's disciples, they go to John, speaking of baptism, hey, John, you told us about, you testified about one who was with you across the Jordan. Who is that? Well, it's Jesus. And he is baptizing, and notice their concern. They want to talk to John because they are really bothered because they said everyone is going to him. Now, for some period of time, we have watched as you have been teaching and you have been engaging people and you have been saying all that you have been saying, crowds have been getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And everywhere you go, there's more people that want to show up to hear. But, lately, look at this spreadsheet that we put together, and you can see over time, you can see the trend line. And so we were up here, but now it's not simply plateaued, it's declined because people aren't coming to you, they're going to him, this guy, Jesus. Everyone is going to him, and they are concerned about that. Now, it is after hearing that John says, listen, no one can receive anything unless it's been given to him by heaven, which is, in a sense, to say this. Whatever notoriety, whatever position, unofficial or official that I have by virtue of the fact that God has entrusted this into my care. I don't have anything that I have made. Whatever I have because God has entrusted this into my care. And he says, you yourselves, in verse 28, can testify. I told you guys, I don't know if you remember this, but I can go back in my journal. I can tell you, told them on this date, I told you guys, I am not the Messiah. That I'm not the one that people have been looking for centuries, for millennia. I am instead the one that has been sent ahead of him. I am one of those people that helps lay the groundwork. I'm an advance man is essentially what I am. And he says, and he continues by talking about that the one who has the bride is the groom. And he says all of this stuff. And John understands that he has this spotlight, that he has this attention, but he's got a proper perspective of it. And he deals with it properly. And it's important to note not simply what John says, but what he does not say. John does not say, well, guys, it took me a while to get here, but, I've read a lot, I've studied a lot, I've experienced a lot, and people are listening because I've learned some how-tos, and I've read a lot of books on leadership, and I've been to a lot of workshops and conferences, and I've put a lot of tools in my tool belt, and that's the reason that we've had all this success. Does he do any of that? No, he says the only reason that we've had anybody is because God has entrusted this to us. I've gotten in the spotlight because that's where God put me. And so he's understanding, and he's trying to communicate a very simple truth, which again is that he was not the main attraction. Let me illustrate it this way. I have been, as I'm sure you have over the years, to a varied number of concerts. But because I'm cooler than the average person, I go to a lot of bluegrass concerts. And so I went to one, this was a couple of years ago. It was over in Statesville, and I think we took virtually all the kids. And this particular one, it was in a church, but it wasn't. You had to have a ticket, but it wasn't reserved seating, and so you just needed to get there early to get a decent seat. And it was supposed to start at 6, and so we get there a bit early, and the place is almost already packed because that's how bluegrass rolls. Anyway, so. It's a group called Doyle, Lawson, and Quicksilver is the group that we've gone to see. And we find a seat or enough seats for our family to be able to sit together. And right around 6-ish, it began. So whoever the MC is, whoever's leading this, they get up there and they start to talk for a minute. And then they begin to introduce some folks that I don't know if they were with that church or what it was. And they got up there, a varied number of people, and they would play and sing. And honestly, they weren't bad, but I started looking at my watch, and I'm like, is Joel ever going to come out here? I mean, like, I am, they're fine, but I didn't come here to see them. I came here to see this group. Now, what would we call all of those people? We would call them, like, the opening act, wouldn't we? And what's the goal of the opening act? Well, for one thing, it is to prepare you, to get you ready for the main attraction. And they had done, I was ready for the main attraction. And John is saying to his disciples, who are really concerned that his star is decreasing and that somehow the attention is getting a little less, they're concerned. Hey, everybody's going to Jesus. And John is saying, listen, that's how it ought to be. That's how it ought to be, because I am not the main attraction. As you serve the Lord, as you make yourself available to Him, maybe it's in a Sunday school class and you wind up leading that group. Maybe it is that there is a new study group that begins and you are instrumental in getting that off the ground. Maybe it is it's working in children's ministry. Maybe it is that it's sharing something in the workplace environment. Maybe it is that you're leading a backyard Bible club in your neighborhood. Whatever it is, and there are millions of ways that we can be led by God to serve Him and to be used by Him. But as that happens, God is going to use you to engage people. And as you engage people, increasingly, you're going to have more and more attention. And you have to be mindful of this. You are not the main attraction. You're not. Unless, of course, you think it's all about you. But if you understand that it's not, that as a follower of Jesus, that magnify Him and making His name great, if that's job one, well then it makes it a lot easier for me to remember I'm an opening act. Yes, I'm on the stage. Yes, I'm in some spotlights, but I'm not the main attraction. John was on the stage. He was in the spotlight, but he wasn't the main attraction, and he knew it. But there's another thing that John understood, which is this, that we also must do, which is to be intentional about using the dimming switch. Be intentional in using the dimming switch. John is talking to some of his followers that really care for him, that love him. They've invested a lot, sacrificed a lot to follow him from place to place, hearing what he has to say as God continues to speak through him. And he says something that is not going to make a ton of sense to them at the moment, but the longer they lived and the more truth that they were able to receive, the more it was going to make sense. He's just told them, I'm not the Messiah. And then he says, he who has the bride, well, that's the groom. That's the groom, or the bridegroom. That's the one that gets the bride. And then he says, but the groom's friend who stands by and listens for him, he rejoices greatly at the groom's voice. The groom's friend, what would we call that person today? We would say that's one of the attendants. That's one of the groomsmen. You may even say it's the best man. Now, the best man in a wedding gets, they get a great position, don't they? They're part of the wedding party. They get to see this up close and personal as the bride and groom are formally joined together. But the groom, unless the wedding goes really bad, the best man does not leave with the bride. Well, the groom leaves with the bride. And so he's trying to say, guys, I am not the groom. I'm like one of the attendants, and I'm just thrilled to be standing up here in a tux. I'm just thrilled to have the opportunity to be able to get in the pictures. I'm thrilled to even be here at this, to know about this. I love this. I'm grateful for this, but I am not the groom. And it's clear he's saying that Jesus is the groom. Again, that's going to make a lot more sense a little bit later, where repeatedly in the New Testament, what are we described as? Not just followers of Jesus, not children, not sons and daughters of God, although all those things are true, that collectively all the followers of Jesus are described as what? The bride of Christ. And John says, listen, I'm not the groom. That's Jesus. I am tickled. I'm thrilled to be like a best man and who rejoices greatly at the groom's voice to know that you are here and that you're going to take your bride. He says, at this point, this joy of mine is complete. What is going on should be going on. This is how it ought to operate. I am thrilled about this. And then makes a particularly poignant statement where he says, he, that's Jesus, must increase, but I must decrease. I want you to think of John's position and his prominence over time. It's been kind of like a ladder. And as he began, he's getting a little bit higher, and a little bit higher as more and more people take note, as more and more people notice him, as there are more and more people that are following him from place to place. The spotlight is brighter. The attention that he is getting is more significant. His notoriety has increased. People know about him. People are following him from place to place, and there is absolutely this sense in which John is getting higher on the ladder. Now, generally speaking, as people and as in particular American culture, isn't that kind of what we aspire to? I mean, in the business world, what do we talk about it as? It's described as what? Climbing the corporate ladder. That you want greater prominence, that you want greater position, that you aspire to have more, that you aspire to be over more, that you aspire greater position and greater prominence and greater influence. That's how we tend to work. But with all of that, what does John say? He intentionally decides and voices his desire that he doesn't want to go higher on the ladder. He wants to take some steps down. That if it's being in the spotlight, he wants to go over to the dimmer switch and to dim the spotlight that is on him. Why is that? A couple of years ago, I had gotten my first smartwatch. I'm wearing one this morning, and so it's always important to know that the preacher has a watch that he may or may not ignore. Anyway, but I've had a smartwatch now for a couple of years, and I remember my first one I had gotten, and very shortly thereafter, I had taken the kids to see a movie. And we don't go to movies very often because, it costs like $19,000 to go there. And so some kids' movie had come out, and I had taken at least the older ones to go and see it. I don't remember what it was. All I know is that it started, and I wasn't particularly interested in this. And so I'm just kind of bored as the kids are watching whatever's going on. And so at that point, I started messing with my watch. I'm still trying to figure out all this stuff. And I do that, and then I put it down. Then I watch the movie for a minute. Then I go back to my watch, and I'm just doing this. And as I'm doing this, that gets interrupted by somebody who is back to my left, and he kicks my chair, and he says, "Turn that watch off." My initial reaction is, I want to do this. But I didn't do it. I didn't say anything. And at that point, actually what I did was to turn the watch off. And even though there was a part of me that kind of recoiled at what just happened, in the end, I realized this. He's here not to see my watch. He's here to see the movie. And the brighter this is in that dark theater, the more it is that his attention is drawn to this. Would you pay money, get a ticket to come and look at my watch? No. You buy a ticket to go watch the movie. And the guy was saying, that's too bright. I can't see what I need to see. As you follow Jesus, and the more it is that you take your responsibilities and obligations as one of his followers seriously, he is going to use you. And yes, there will be, and I'm not saying that your name will ever be on a sign and that there will be thousands of people or tens of thousands of people that gather to hear you and want to know about what you're going to say next or what you're going to sing next or all of this stuff, that you are a keynote speaker at conference. I'm not suggesting any of that. But in ways both small and great, as you serve the Lord, you're going to get more attention by other people. And it's important to remember that as you get that attention, manage it properly. That you need to be intentional about using the dimming switch, because what people need to see is not you. What people need to see is him. Because in the end, he can do something for them. He can change their life. He can change their eternity. Intentionally use the dimming switch. What does this look like? How in the world can we actually do this? It is, bear in mind, possible that God will use you. It's certain. If you make yourself available, he'll use you in ways that others will notice. And one thing that has to be in the forefront of my mind and in yours is this: whether or not people know me is inconsequential. But whether they know Jesus, that matters. Whether or not people know me is inconsequential, but whether they know Jesus matters. That has to be on the front burner of your mind. Secondly, you need to ask yourself, as you're weighing decisions about, do I pursue this? Is this a door of opportunity I ought to go through? Should I consider this? Should I consider that? You need to ask yourself this: is the real aim so that my star rises, so that more light shines on me, or is the greater desire that I might have even more opportunity, not to shine on me, but to shine on him? What is my real desire? Now listen, I believe especially on that front, you're going to need some help. I'm going to need some help. And we need to be intentional in saying, God, help me to see the truth about my motivations. Why do I aspire to this? Why might I pursue this? Is it so that I can make you bigger, or so that I get higher on the ladder and that the light gets brighter on me? At the beginning of this series, we started with a very simple premise: that God's desire in my life and in yours is to demonstrate himself through us. And while it is almost cliche, unfortunately, we so many times forget it, that especially as his follower, it is not about me. But as you serve him, as he uses you, you're going to get some attention. But how are you going to manage it? Are you going to make it such, and you're going to decide such so that you get more attention, or so that he does? The question is whether you truly get and understand it's not about you. Will you bow your heads with me? If you're here this morning, or if you're watching online, everything that we've talked about today is contingent on and is related to this idea of having a relationship with Jesus, you having your own personal relationship with Jesus. And that as you have that, he'll use you. That doesn't happen unless you have that relationship. So do you? Do you know it for certain? If you don't, if you're watching online, will you call us? Will you email us? Will you reach out to us? Because we want to help you. If you're here this morning and you say, well, Michael, I'm here all the time, but truth be told, that struck me in ways today that my attention hasn't been garnered before, and I realize I don't have it. I really don't. I don't think he's using me because I can't say that I'm his. If that's you, will you share that with me? After the service, we'll take whatever time you need to settle that, and you can have your own personal relationship with him. But if you've already crossed that line and you say, I've got that, let me ask you this: is he using you at all? Is he? I mean, is there anybody that, in ways, small or great, that God is using you to impact someone else for him? If the answer to that is no, can I just tell you that's a problem? It shouldn't be that way. And I don't believe it's because there's a lack of God's willingness. I think the real reason is that you've given to him a lack of availability. You've been too busy, too focused on something else. Maybe what God needs to hear you to say is, Lord, in my heart, in my life, I've been pushing you out. And I want you to use me. I want my life to matter, not for me, not for my business, not for my company, but for you. And as you have that desire, as you make yourself available, he's using and will use you, but make sure that you manage that attention well so that ultimately everything stays about him. Father, we just want to say thank you that you have chosen the weak things of this world to confound the mighty, the strong, and the professedly wise. You've chosen to use us. Even though you've chosen to use us, it's possible. In fact, across this room, I think we'd have to all say that there has been limits that we've placed on our availability. And I pray, Lord, that we would decide we're going to quit throttling you. We're going to take our foot off the brake and say, all right, Lord, here I am. Use me, however it is, for whomever it is that you want to use me with. As that happens, Lord, I want to guard my pride. I want to guard my ego. I want to keep me in check because I want you to work through me and to demonstrate yourself through me so that it's not about me, but it's about you. Lord, I believe sincerely when that's our prayer, when that's our heart's desire, you can use that. And I pray across this room, across the internet, that's our prayer. And you, for your glory, will use us. We say this to you in Jesus' name. Amen.